Alright, is this picking this up now? Alright. Holy shit, I have a microphone now. So, 2021 has come to a close, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone when I say it couldn't have been any better. Yeah, no problems here, definitely, nothing to see here. Yeah, it was totally perfect year here. But hey, it wasn't all that bad for me. I graduated college, I finally started this goddamn YouTube channel. I got to see my favorite band live in concert, and I proved to the world that I was, in fact, funnier than Jack's films.
Judges, which... Whoa! No!
Oh, baby, don't cry. But you know what else I love besides all of that? Movies, games, TV shows, music, the endless cycle of consumer capitalism in the media industry. So for this video, I'm going to do what every original content creator on this platform does, make a best and worst list for the year. I'm going to be going through a few different categories and discussing what I personally felt were the best movies, games, shows, and albums of the year, and some of the worst. This is not in any set list, no top 10s or 5s or any kind of Watch Mojo shit like that. And yeah, this should go without saying, but you know, this is just all my opinions and stuff, not that they fucking matter. So yeah, I suck at transitions, let's just get on with it.
Well, this sucks.
So, for my very first choice for my very first list, in my very first editorial video on this channel, here's a choice that sure won't rustle some feathers. Black Widow. I wanted to like this movie. I really wanted to love this movie from start to finish, but it's just kind of, well, there. Now, let me clarify, Black Widow isn't terrible. It's competently made, it has some alright action scenes. I really like Florence Pugh as Yelena, she's easily the best part of this movie, but everything else around this movie just kind of feels... there. Ever since Endgame, I feel like the MCU has been struggling to figure out what it really wants to do next. It doesn't really build up to anything big anymore. I mean, yeah, that formula works well when you're spending 20 plus films building up to a big 2-part finale, but after that, yeah, it starts getting stale. Black Widow just doesn't really do anything new. It doesn't really bring anything interesting or unique to the table. It's just a really by-the-numbers MCU film. Not bad, but not great either. And I hate that. We've been asking for a Black Widow solo film for years, and the result is a lot less than what we were hoping for or expecting. Jesus Christ, Taskmaster in this film has got to be the biggest disappointment. This really should have been one of the coolest, most interesting villains in the whole MCU, and it turned out to be a total failure so bad that you'll start gaslighting yourself into believing the Mandarin in Iron Man 3 was underrated.
Hey! How did they get you in 4K?
So, yeah, overall it isn't really great, but it's not really a total failure for its franchise either.
Good God, man! You almost got the cheese touch.
Yeah, remember that this came out? I almost didn't until I saw it on Disney Plus while I was watching Hawkeye a couple months ago. So, here's the thing. The original Wimpy Kid trilogy, and yes, I mean trilogy. What? No, there was no fourth one. There was never a fourth one. What the fuck are you talking about? There was never a fourth one. There's never a fourth one! The original trilogy wasn't an absolute high bar of quality that would give Citizen Kane, The Godfather, and Boyhood a run for its money, but it was a series that understood its audience and its source material well. Honestly, a lot more than a lot of book-to-film adaptations can really say about themselves. The animated version is just another movie that exists. Honestly, I struggle to even call it a movie considering it runs less than an hour of runtime, with credits. This movie is just awkward from start to finish, with animation and voice acting that very clearly needed more time to be worked on. Greg's an incredibly boring character in this, and ironically enough, it's because he's actually somewhat likable in this. Because as we all know from over a decade of joking about how this kid is so unlikable, he's a borderline sociopath, Greg is definitely written to be a likable protagonist. There's no reason for this film to exist. Honestly, it's just a prime example of Disney taking a fairly popular property and turning it into something that just feels way more hollow and shallow than it really needs to be. Speaking of hollow and shallow, yeah, when this came out, I thought it was gonna be bad in an ironic way, but no, it's just bad. It's really bad. It's really hard for me to talk about Space Jam 2 because there's really nothing to it. There's barely any story. There's barely anything interesting going on with the Looney Tunes. This isn't a movie. It's an excuse for Warner Brothers to just flaunt and show off how many properties they own in this weird dick measuring contest showcasing which corporate entity has the biggest monopoly on the industry. And they don't even do anything interesting with it. Like, isn't Godzilla a Warner Brothers property? Like, why isn't there a scene where Godzilla is shooting some fucking hoops? can you imagine how much better this movie would be if you just saw Godzilla shooting some fucking hoops? I want to see Godzilla fucking balling, god damn it! And somehow I saw a movie this year that has a story to it, but somehow manages to tell less of a story than this weird flex from Warner Brothers. So, do you remember that Camila Cabello was in a Cinderella movie made by Amazon Studios? Yeah, it's about as bad as you probably think it is.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
This movie is like a fever dream of misdirection from start to finish. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. Several times during the film, I was kind of in awe of what I was watching because I just could not believe that what I was watching was real. You know those knockoff animated movies that come out around the time that popular Disney films do? Like Frozen Land or Wings or Ratatouille? How the fuck do you say that? Like, how the hell do you say that? Imagine a Cinderella movie like that, but it's live action instead of animated. That's pretty much what this movie is. Camila Cabello gives one of the worst performances I've ever seen in my entire life. Pierce Brosnan plays this laughably bad villain, I think? Can't even say that. I'm going fucking insane. This movie's making me fucking insane. Even Idina Menzel isn't even good in this. Like, how do you get a talent responsible for starring the modern, misunderstood villain trope and create an empire of Disney merchandising, and all you can do with her is this? At the end of the day, Cinderella reminds me a lot of when I got my COVID booster shot. My memory's hazy, and what I can remember gave me fever dreams and rapid flashes as if I was being slapped by the hand of God. It's really not a pleasant experience I want to have again.
Oh my god! Wow!
Okay, so for this part of the video, before I get into my top picks, I'm gonna zip through a bunch of honorable mentions. Zack Snyder's Justice League, a 4-hour epic that is a drastic improvement over the original cut. And this is honestly living proof that the DCEU could have actually been fantastic had Warner Brothers not constantly and consistently interfered. Not to mention the fact that it even exists to begin with is insane, and I just love it for that. Godzilla vs. Kong.
Watch out! Watch out! Watch out! Watch out!
I really don't think I need to elaborate on this. The Suicide Squad. Again, a perfect case where seeing a director's uncompromised vision puts out incredible results. James Gunn's direction in this is the best it has ever been, with some of the best characters and best moments the DCEU has ever offered. Free Guy. Okay, but seriously, this movie had no right being as good as it was. Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds at his best, the angle of a video game NPC coming self-aware is neat and interesting. It begs a lot of interesting and philosophical questions about the nature of life and free will. No, I am not making that up. And it gets spot on, sometimes uncomfortably spot on about the current state of working within the video game industry.
Free City 2 was backwards compatible. It was in the commercial. You said there'd be the same characters in the sequel.
Well, here's the thing. When I said that, I was like...
Look, I know there's no way the people making this could have known about Activision and Blizzard when they were making this, but... like, come on. No Time to Die. I was actually kind of worried about this one following the dumpster fire that was Spectre, praying that if nothing else, this would at least give us a good end to Daniel Craig's run as James Bond, and thankfully it did. While I would say No Time to Die is far from the best of Craig's outings, it's got the most heart behind it, finally wrapping up every loose end and giving us some much needed closure on this iteration of Bond. Encanto. You know, initially I didn't really think much of this film, but the more and more I think about it, the better it gets. Like, best film Disney Animation has put out in almost 10 years better. This movie is a colorful joy from start to finish with some of the best animation, voice acting, choreography, and songs from any Disney movie in the last decade. And last but not least, Last Night in Soho. It's not perfect by any means, and it does have some story and tonal issues, but I'm really too enticed by the film's creativity to really care about that. There's no movie out there that's quite like Last Night in Soho, from its premise to the way it's shot and filmed to the performances. It's unique in a lot of aspects in ways that only a movie could accomplish, and I love it all the more for that. So, let's get into detail on what were more or less my 3 favorite films to come out this year.
I don't like sand.
So I was incredibly excited and horrified about Dune. I read the book for the first time a couple years ago, and it has since become one of my all-time favorite books. Possibly my favorite, actually. The characters, the world building, the amount of effort that was put into every single detail. It's a complicated read, but it's complicated in all the right ways, which is probably why there hasn't really been a good adaptation of it yet. So going into this, after all the hype and all the buzz about how great it was, I walked out of it incredibly satisfied. Mostly. See, the thing is, Dune is hard to talk about, not just because it's such an involved story, but because this film technically isn't even finished. This is only the first half of the book. It's half of a story. It remains to be seen how the second part is handled, and if, after it comes out, this is truly the definitive adaptation of the book. But oh my god, if this second part is anywhere as quality as this first one, holy shit, we're in for a modern masterpiece here. Dune feels gargantuan. Every single frame, every single shot, every single sequence in this movie is filmed like a grand epic. Seeing the landscapes of these planets is quite literally breathtaking at some points. It's larger than light. Denis Villeneuve's direction is absolutely masterful. From a purely visual standpoint, Dune is just a marvel to look at and captures the feel of Frank Herbert's original novel so well. And I can say the same thing about all the characters in this film. This film has a star-studded cast from Timothée Chalamet to Oscar Isaac to Zendaya to Rebecca Ferguson. I really don't think I need to tell you that these performances are great across the board. Yeah, it probably does have a few issues, like this is a movie you really have to sit your ass down and pay attention to because there's just so much detail packed into it. It's not something you can just watch casually. But as a fan of the book, as a fan of film as an art form, this movie just floored me, and I really hope the second part can deliver in spades. Okay, so if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home by now, I think you can understand why it's so high up here. When it came to all the Marvel movies and shows that came out this year, it wasn't even a contest. No Way Home was easily the best thing Marvel Studios put out all year. I mean, maybe next to a certain TV show I'll talk about later. But anyways, No Way Home just feels like a celebration of Spider-Man and what makes the character so special. Okay, no, not in that way. Like, not in that way. It's different. I promise you, it's different.
Sure.
What I mean is that this film puts on display a celebration of every live-action Spider-Man film we've gotten so far. It celebrates and embraces what people love about every single one of these films, from the Raimi films, to the Amazing films, to the MCU films. It has some of the best action sequences out of the MCU to date. It has Tom Holland's best performance as Peter Parker by a long shot. He hasn't been this great as a character since Civil War. The fan service in this film is the absolute best way to handle fan service in a film like this. It does exactly what you would hope for and want from a movie like this, without being in sacrifice to the larger story and narrative it's trying to tell. At some points, I honestly say it plays out more like a fan film come to life in a lot of ways, but it never actually detracts from the movie itself. At the end of the day, No Way Home is just a fantastic love letter to Spider-Man fans. It's the perfect culmination of 3 generations of Spider-Man films, and even with its issues and its MCU cliches, I still think it stands as one of the best Spider-Man films to date.
I've always preferred the cream part of an Oreo. That's crazy. The cookie's the best part.
So every year when I decide what my favorite film of the year is, I usually struggle. I always juggle around which one I feel is deserving of the best, and as years go by, sometimes I look back on my lists and think, man, I wish that was higher, or I should have put that one lower. And this year is no different. But when it came down to the movie which I loved the most, I enjoyed the most, the one I felt was going to stick with me the most, ultimately I think it all came down to one movie I saw earlier this summer. A Quiet Place Part 2. Now, I watched the first Quiet Place around the beginning of the pandemic after hearing such strong word of mouth about it for almost 2 years, and I was absolutely floored from start to finish. This film's use of sound is nothing short of magnificent, keeping the tension at an all-time high constantly throughout the entire runtime. This movie doesn't fuck around with its premise. From the very, very beginning, you know how dangerous the situation is, how much you appreciate this family actually being smart about it, and how one little fuck-up can mean the difference between life and death. People at the time held it as one of the best horror films of its year and perhaps the decade, and well, yeah, I agree. But the sequel was an experience I had unlike any other. The tension is built up, the scares are built up, the sound design is built up. On every conceivable level, this film improves upon what made the original so great. The first 10 minutes showing what happens on day 1 of this alien invasion is one of the best horror sequences I've ever seen in a film, and it only goes up from there. This feels like a sequel similar in vein and scope to films like Aliens and Terminator 2. There's definitely a bit more of a horror action thing going on here than straight up horror, and as a result, this movie feels a lot more dreadful than the first. The bear trap scene, the monster attack on the train, the final monster sequence on the island, all of them up the tension in more creative ways than the first film. But oh my god, my favorite has to be about halfway into the film, when the story crosses between these 3 different scenes. The pier, the town, and the factory. I'm not exaggerating, I have never felt so tense during a film as I did during this part. Watching all 3 of these sequences happening at once quite literally ups the tension times 3, and no sequence has any kind of dominance over the others. Having to feel the dread of all these characters in different places at once made me anxious like you wouldn't believe. You're not just watching a single character and how they'll get out of a situation, you're watching 5 of them in 3 completely separate scenarios happening at the same time. And I gotta give a standing ovation to John Krasinski for skillfully directing and overlaying 3 separate sequences at once like this. The performances across the board are incredible. Emily Blunt is obviously great. Cillian Murphy has had the best performance of his career in this film, but the show stealers are definitely Millicent Simmons and Noah Jupe. Millicent Simmons conveys so much with so little, and I was just absolutely amazed at how captivated I was with her character. Bringing her, an actual deaf actress, to this film was already one of the best things the first film did, especially in context to its premise, and she's just even better here. Honestly, it's probably my favorite performance of the entire year. A Quiet Place Part 2 succeeds on so many levels. It succeeds as a sequel, it succeeds as a tense action movie, it succeeds as a horror film, it succeeds as a film. It's one of those movies I watch in theaters every now and then that just kind of reminds me, yeah, movies are pretty fucking awesome.
Can you keep it quiet back there, woman? I'm watching the TV.
I didn't really watch any bad TV shows this year. I don't know if that's a testament to how good it was this year or to how little TV I actually watched this year, but hey, I didn't watch a show that even came close to Cinderella's quality, so I'll call that a success no matter what the medium is.
Don't sweat it, sis. It's not like your dead husband could die twice.
Dude, I can't even begin to describe how big WandaVision was in my own social bubbles. It wasn't just Marvel fans watching this show, everyone I knew was watching this, even people who had never cared about the MCU to begin with. Besides The Mandalorian, this was really the first big massive hit Disney Plus had on its terms of its general popularity, and I think it's well deserved. For the most part. So first off, if nothing else, WandaVision has become one of my favorite projects in the entire MCU because it actually takes risks. Telling this story in this format where every episode is based around a popular television show for each respective decade is such a cool idea, and they really make it live up to its potential right up until the end. The mystery it set up at the beginning was so intriguing. I've never felt so involved at wanting to figure out or predict what would happen next for anything in the MCU. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany really shine in this series. The range they have on their performances, both in their characters and replicating the style of show they're in, it's honestly just remarkable. And then it all falls apart in the last 2 episodes. This show is the biggest cock tease in the entire MCU because it showed that when the MCU is willing to experiment like this, it can give us some of the best superhero content out there. But of course, in its final 2 episodes, it falls back to every MCU cliche that has plagued the series since the first Avengers film. It's not necessarily bad, I mean, I like the philosophical fight the 2 visions have towards the end, but everything else just falls under the usual CGI fight umbrella that every MCU finale has to have, and I just wish it didn't. And then it has the audacity to try and present Wanda as the misunderstood hero by the end of it, and I'm like, what? No! You enslaved an entire town and treated them like NPCs from the Postal games!
Would you please sign my petition?
I'm sorry.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Also, this isn't in the script, this is a little bit unscripted, but everything they did with Quicksilver in this, and the big fucking tease where we thought it was gonna be X-Men, and then it turns out, ha ha ha, boner joke. No, fuck this. This is one of the worst things the MCU has ever done. Anyways, it really falls flat towards the end, but that isn't enough to prevent me from recommending it, because what we get beforehand is easily the most ambitious, experimental, and creative the MCU has been since Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Fuck.
So talking about The Witcher Season 2 is a bit complicated because on paper, this should do everything better than its first season. It has a unified, cohesive narrative as opposed to the 3 happening at different intervals in the first season. The characterization is improved, the world is expanded upon, they give a platform to the villains to better understand their motives, and yet for some reason I can't help but feel the first season was better in a lot of ways. Now don't get me wrong, The Witcher Season 2 is still good, it wouldn't be here if it wasn't. I like the entire plot with Geralt and Ciri and their journeys as Geralt tries to care for Ciri and Ciri trains to become a Witcher herself. Their dynamic is fantastic and I love seeing them interact with the other Witchers. Also, Jaskier is still the highlight of the show.
Gentlemen, it's been an honor. What? I made new friends. Get over it.
jealous.
Why are we still here?
But while it does these things extremely well, it kind of falters with everything else. I really don't like Yennefer's subplot in the season and where it takes her. I like that they give the villains more time on screen, but they spend so much time on a subplot with them and the elves that it starts to get tiring and boring watching after a while. Unlike the first season, which tied together 3 great narratives in a really awkward way, this season has 1 incredible narrative and 2 that are mostly subpar. So yeah, it's not mind-blowingly great, but I wish it could have been better. There's elements here that make for an amazing show, and I feel like it's only a matter of time before people realize the show has potential on the level of juggernauts like Game of Thrones. Well, okay, I guess it kind of is, I guess if they haven't already. Look, my point is, this could turn into something huge, and something great. I just hope it doesn't take much longer to get there.
Just make a normal face. See? Normal face.
Okay, so I might be kind of cheating here since this is technically a special and not a show, but fuck it, I'm putting it here anyways. This past year, HBO Max wrapped up its Adventure Time Distant Lands series. Now, for those of you not in the know, which, considering my subscriber numbers, is all of you who are probably watching this right now, Adventure Time is my favorite television show. Very few media properties have really left an impact on my life quite like Adventure Time has, and it's a show I cherish and hold dear to my heart to this day. I love the 2020 specials, BMO and Obsidian, and while the final one this year, Wizard City, is also great, it's the 3rd special, Together Again, that really struck a chord with me. This feels like the perfect send-off for the entire series, even more so than its series finale from 2018. Because while that finale wrapped up a lot of plot lines, character moments, and more, it seemed to forget the main thing that kept the entire show together, Finn and Jake. These two were kind of sidelined in the original finale, and this special is the answer to that. It's a moving and sometimes downright depressing exploration of these two characters and their dynamic together and how they navigate loss, growing up, and death. Of all the media that came out this year, there was one thing that made me cry all year, and it's the final moments of this special. Because it's not just Finn and Jake's final moments together, showcasing how strong their bond is, but it truly feels like the end of the show. A satisfying conclusion to what arguably started the current golden age of cartoons, and this is the 2nd time they did this! I mean, fuck, how many other shows can say they had a satisfying conclusion twice? I don't fucking know, Breaking Bad and El Camino?
You can't keep getting away with it!
This special encapsulates so much of what I adore about Adventure Time, and it's the perfect send-off to one of the greatest children's shows of all time.
2.5 Men. I watched that.
So you might hear all of that and think, well, what the hell could possibly be your favorite above that then? And to be completely honest, this is mostly above Adventure Time only because it was actually a full TV series and not just a special. But all things considered, it really doesn't change the fact that Invincible was the best TV show I watched all year. Hell, even above Spider-Man, it's one of the best superhero things I've seen in a long while. Invincible is a brilliant deconstruction of the superhero genre. It has a lot of tropes that most superhero shows and movies have, but the way in which they play around and experiment with them is what makes it such a unique experience to watch. The voice acting is top-notch, Steven Yeun is great as Mark, and J.K. Simmons kills it as Omni-Man. The action is brutal in all the best ways. Robert Kirkman's signature style from stuff like The Walking Dead absolutely shines here. But what really elevates this show is how they handle the main villain. Now, without spoiling anything, the way in which they directly tell you who's the big bad behind all of this and let that tension build throughout the show is brilliant. It makes for an incredibly uncomfortable and unpredictable villain, as you don't know what his true motives and intentions are until the very end. The finale to this first season is one of the best finales I have ever seen, delivering on its bad guy in a way so shocking, it kind of makes a certain other Robert Kirkman role played by Steven Yeun look like child's play. It's awesome. It's one of the best shows Amazon has to offer right now, and you should watch it. Seriously, go watch it now.
Yeah, I'm riding through the area.
Lorde is one of my all-time favorite musicians. Her first album, Pure Heroine, captivated 14-year-old me with such a unique style and striking sound. Her second album, Melodrama, enticed me even more with its complex production and lyricism. And then there's Solar Power. This record hit me like whiplash with its disappointment. I did love the titular single that came out before it and couldn't wait to see what the rest of the album was like, but the end result is just so not good. It's weird because this album is so defined by having an identity centered around solipsism and clearly wants to make a statement about it, and yet doesn't do anything with it. Lorde comes off less like she's trying to make a statement on this kind of culture, and more so just singing a bland record around it. All the songs sound really samey, they lack the gut punch that Lord's previous work has had. It's not absolutely awful, but it's painfully bland, and one of the biggest disappointments I listened to all year. Well, right next to this record. I am gonna repeat myself here, but I really need to stress this. I love Dodie. I love her vibe, her aesthetic, her style, and it all falls into her music so well. She has such a relaxed, laid-back vibe to her music, combined with some of the best lyricism and writing I've ever seen from a musician. Her previous EPs showed a growth and upward trajectory to her work, all building up to a potential album I could not wait to listen to. And then it happened. I forgot about it as quickly as I listened to it. Build a Problem is easily the most disappointed I've ever felt listening to an album, because in a lot of ways, this record feels like what people who dislike Dodie think Dodie's music sounds like. It is way too quiet and laid back, as opposed to her previous EPs. Which, yes, they could be somber and quiet, but they still either had great lyricism or great production to back it up. I mean, look at this example. Her song Monster is a lot more punchy and in your face. Probably the most involved she's ever been musically. Meanwhile, you have a song like Burned Out, which is a quiet piano ballad, but it's made up for with intense, somber lyrics. Here, Dodie's singing is so low and somber, and the music is so quiet and backseated that you can't even tell what's going on most of the time. Multiple times through multiple songs, I failed to hear any semblance of a beat, a melody, anything that could tell me how the song is supposed to sound. Which frustrates me, because this is an album that should work for me, given I like her previous stuff so much. But it's just too quiet. It's too wrapped up in making an artistic statement, but it doesn't seem to grasp what artistic statement that should be. I really hope she learns from this record and comes back with a much, much stronger record, more in line with her 3 EPs, because as this stands, I just can't get into anything on this album.
What'd he say? Garbage?
I don't know what compelled me to listen to AJR's latest record, but I did anyways. And I'm not really sure what's worse, this album being as bad as it is, or the fact that I seem to see most fans of the band agree that this is their best album. OK Orchestra is bad. It's really, really bad. Now, if you're super into the music scene, I don't think I necessarily need to tell you that. AJR has been notorious for years because of their questionable approach to modern alternative music. Hell, I fucking struggle to call it alternative. It's pop. It's just fucking pop music. That's all it fucking is. Because what's happening here is essentially what you get when a toddler writes their first song by using the first words that come to their head and then bashing a xylophone toy. AJR is childish, both in their lyricism and their production, but they never do anything creatively engaging with it. It's the equivalent of throwing a bunch of instruments against the wall and saying, yeah, this sounds like the most misshapen, discombobulated, and unorganized sound possible. Drop it. So disorganized and disorienting and lacks any kind of real identity. And the lyrics? You want substance with your meal? You want that full 8-ounce steak you ordered? Fuck you, here's a thin slice of dried turkey from National Lampoon instead. The lyrics are hollow. There's no depth to any of the ideas here, and the whole approach of them trying to make it sound childish comes off less endearing and more like, well, an actual child wrote this. It's the absolute definition of I'm 14 and this is deep. I really don't get how this band is popular. I mean, I guess a part of me can appreciate it when any kind of artist tries to experiment with their craft, but like, is it really experimentation when that experiment results in only a slight resemblance of what you were originally experimenting with? And you wanna know what the worst part is? Or maybe, in this case, the best part? That wasn't even the worst record I listened to all year. So, unlike AJR's latest record, I deliberately listened to Tones and I's debut record, Welcome to the Madhouse. Why? Because everyone said it sucked ass, and quickly touted it as not just the worst record of the year, but one of the worst records ever made. And I thought, wow! That sounds like total shit. I gotta listen to it now. And honestly, I'll give Tones and I this. Making me rather listen to AJR over this monstrosity of a record is an accomplishment. How? How does this record exist? Why does it exist? Why did anyone think to give the person behind something like Dance Monkey an opportunity to make even more music? This record is a mess because unlike AJR's record, which was mostly a mess of instruments, this record is a mess of production. Fuck, I mean, yes, now I'm thinking about it, it's a mess of everything fucking else. Nothing on this album sounds good. The beats, the instrumentation, the mixing and mastering, the fucking vocals that give me war flashbacks to Screaming Goat memes from the early 2010s. It encompasses everything that's wrong with modern pop music in a single record. This is an album from a multi-million-dollar pop artist that has drum pedals squeaking in it. Like actual squeaky noises coming from the drums. Like, yeah, AJR's music is bad, but at least it's confidently bad. How do you let production blemishes like this slide? But yeah, it's a shitty record. Honestly, it might be the worst record I've ever listened to, period, not just this year. I've mostly cleaned it from my brain, and I intend to keep it that way. Just please stop playing and smoking on the radio stations and in stores, please, for the love of God.
Your newfangled thinking will get us all killed. Youth culture forever!
Alright, so let's get into the best albums of the year. To kind of come full circle with talking about Adventure Time earlier, let's talk about Jeremy Shada. You probably know him as the voice of Finn, or other popular characters like Lance from Voltron, the Running Errands with My Mom kid, and... Wait, what the fuck? He was in Surf's Up too?
Nah, I got a better idea.
Hey! What are you doing? Stop that! Hey, I mean it!
You fucked up my face.
Anyways, you may or may not know he makes music as well, and I don't mean just the songs from Adventure Time, I mean actual commercial music. He came onto the scene with his brother Zach and friends in the band Make Out Monday, and if you haven't listened to their first record, Visions of Hollywood, I highly recommend it. It's honestly one of the best hidden gems to come out in recent years. But this new stuff he's putting out as a solo outing this year is a far cry from the pop-punk stuff he put out under Make Out Monday. Case in point, Vintage. An imperfect, albeit decent start to his solo career following his first EP earlier in the year. Vintage is a grab bag of different shades of pop music, from a more classy, jazz-like style on songs like Bewitched and Back in Fashion, to some more modern pop stylings like Pretty Little Lies and This Feels Right. So the big two problems with this record mostly lie in derivation and songwriting. If you listen to anything in the pop scene in the last decade, a lot of this is going to sound familiar. Jeremy pulls from a lot of artists like Justin Timberlake and Maroon 5, well, old school Maroon 5, I'm talking like songs about Jane Maroon 5, not whatever the hell they've been putting out for the past 10 years. Anyway, while it sounds technically sound and Jeremy's vocals are really great, nothing here sounds particularly original. I also can't help but feel like there was some missed opportunity on the writing end of the album. Jeremy makes so many references to classic media, but doesn't really do anything with them besides coming off as a I was born in the wrong generation kind of guy. Now granted, that having been said, there are a few really great standouts on this record. When Jeremy is leaning into more of an old-fashioned jazz-like pop tune like Back in Fashion or Bewitched, it sounds great. It's classy, it's whimsical, it's... well, vintage. One of the best songs on the album, Singin' in the Rain, feels like what this album was trying to go for with the whole oldie aesthetic, where Jeremy is singing about how much he wants his relationship to be like the ones of the golden age of cinema, but instead is a lot more grounded in reality like modern cinema. It's great stuff, and I wish the whole album was like it. But don't take my criticisms as me disliking the album. It's extremely safe, but it's a lot better than a decent amount of pop acts that are out there right now.
Can I get your digits, girl?
An Evening with Silk Sonic seemingly came out of nowhere. I don't know why it happened. I don't think anyone does, but holy shit, is music all the better for it. An Evening with Silk Sonic is the perfect throwback album, celebrating the absolute best of 80s soul, funk, and R&B. It's not trying to do anything profound or thought-provoking. It's just a fun album from beginning to end. From heavy-hitting, glamorous pop ballads like Smoking Out the Window to laid-back love ballads like Leave the Door Open, this album takes you for a ride, and it's one you'll want to ride over and over again. It's hard to talk about because there's really not a whole lot that this album does wrong. The production is immaculate, the songwriting is catchy as hell, the instrumentation is lavish. It got me into Anderson .Paak and the rest of his music. It's honestly Bruno Mars' best work to date, and considering his discography before that, that is a really high bar to set. An Evening with Silk Sonic is an evening you'll keep replaying and have stuck inside your head for a very long time.
Boy, there's no real easy way to say this, but look, you're a simp.
So, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned getting to see my favorite bands live in concert, so of course I have to put them here somewhere. I've been following Against the Current since close to their beginnings. I remember when their first pre-extended play singles were their newest songs on their channel. So watching them grow and evolve over the years has just been a joy to see. Their first two EPs, Infinity and Gravity, were a collection of songs that defined my early high school years. Their first album is probably my favorite album of all time. I mean, my absolute favorite kind of changes like all the time, but it's like high up there, like very high up there. And while their follow-up Past Lives has soured on me a tiny bit, I still think it's a great record. So naturally, I got excited when That Won't Save Us dropped and promised a direction going back to Against the Current's Gravity era of pop punk and hard rock, as opposed to the pop rock direction they took from album 1 onward. And the end result? yeah, it's pretty good. Now, the Fever EP is not perfect. I do think Shatter is one of their weaker songs today, and the feature by Garden on Again and Again is one of the worst features I have ever heard on any song, Against the Current or otherwise. But if they keep going in this direction, I do think there's room for improvement, and they could potentially put out their best full-length album yet following this. Weapon has become my new favorite song by them by a landslide. I really like the melancholic tone that Lullaby has, and their songs Jump and Burn It Down quite literally sound like they came out of their Gravity and Infinity EPs. They know this is what their oldest fans have wanted for a while, and in that sense, they really deliver. I just wish it was a full album because it left me wanting so much more. Though, granted, I guess that's the best compliment you can give anything.
You can come on the bus. Psych!
Yeah, Call Me If You Get Lost is definitely Tyler's best record to date. Now, I know that's a bold claim for me to say since I've personally only listened to his stuff from Flower Boy onward, but come on, this isn't even a contest unless you have a soft spot for Igor. This record is the accumulation of all of Tyler's best work yet. It feels like every single one of his previous albums has had some kind of flair in this one, as Tyler drops bar after bar after bar, basically beating you in the face with some of the best lyrics and flows of the year. And when it's all over, you realize, holy shit, this is just one song, I still have like 10 more to fucking go. The production on this is controlled chaos. There's so many things about this instrumentation, about these sounds, about everything that shouldn't work. And yet Tyler brings it all together in a cohesive and addictive way that it becomes hard to notice. Corso is the flex song. Lumberjack is an absolute bombardment of sounds and beats, with some of the most intense production I've ever heard on a song. Juggernaut still gives me whiplash every single time the song fakes out towards the beginning. An Evening with Silk Sonic is an entire record full of golden R&B songs, and somehow the best R&B track to come out this year was still What's Your Name. Like, this record is just fucking insane from start to finish, and for a while it was honestly my favorite album to come out this year. That is, until about 2 months after this came out.
Why can't we just get in the running car?
Are you crazy?
Churches has been one of my favorite bands for quite a long time. I first discovered them during the 2015 Game Awards, and that's literally the only thing I can remember from that show that year. I was absolutely mesmerized by their instrumentation, by Lauren Mayberry's vocals. Everything about the band enchanted me. The Bones of What You Believe is one of the best synth pop records of its decade, and Every Open Eye is still one of my all-time favorite records. After this though, I can't really say I liked the direction they started going. When Love Is Dead was announced and subsequently released, I didn't really know what to think. It wasn't a bad album, but not in any way what I expected or wanted out of Churches. Tons of derivation from other alternative artists at the time, from Imagine Dragons to Paramore, moving towards a pop-oriented sound with no strong writing to accompany it. I loved Church's bombastic style they always went for, but when they tried to transition that into the mainstream, yeah, I don't think it really worked. So, needless to say, I was casually optimistic about Screen Violence. I didn't really like its lead single, He Said, She Said, even though I appreciated the message it had going for it, but things slowly looked up as How Not to Drown and Good Girls came out. And when the whole album came out, oh boy, Churches is back, finally. This album is exactly what I wanted Love Is Dead to be, and I was shocked at how it addressed almost every single complaint I had with that record. The writing and lyricism is easily the best from the band, as it no longer relies on stylistic, vague lyrics and opts to be a lot more direct and straightforward with what it's trying to say. The instrumentation and production is a fantastic evolution of the sound from their first two records. I never really realized how fresh Churches would sound mixing their usual synth antics with guitars, bass, drums, piano, you name it. Lauren's vocals are as fantastic as ever. It's a record that the more I listen to it, the better it gets. The heavy dance pop synths on Asking for a Friend, the guitars in California, the synths and drum beats of Final Girl, the pianos of Lullabies, the fact that Better If You Don't mostly abandons Church's traditional synth pop outings for something more acoustic. It's just so surprising to see Churches bounce back this well. As much nostalgic attachment as I have for Every Open Eye, and as much as people herald Bones of What You Believe as their best, I honestly think Screen Violence might be their best album yet. It perfectly evolves the sound of their first two records, fixes all the problems of their third, and above all else, it's just a damn good record.
Gaming.
Alright, last but certainly not least, we got video games. I played a decent amount of them. Some really good, some not so good. Here were some of the mediocre and downright bad ones.
Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh, I shot myself! Stupid gun!
Life is Strange True Colors is easily the best game in the Life is Strange series. It's not amazing, mind you, but considering what we got before,
Jesus, I shot myself!
I'd say not bad is a tremendous effort. Life is Strange True Colors isn't necessarily a bad game. In fact, I kinda liked it a lot in certain aspects. I really like Alex as a character, and I really like some of the side characters like Ryan and Stephanie. I really love the small town of Haven Springs, Colorado. It's got such a subtle and cozy vibe to it. I would love to live in a place like this. But aside from that, it's a mixed bag. True Colors' biggest issues really lie with its pacing. Not a whole lot really happens in this narrative when it comes to the bigger picture of Alex trying to solve the death of her brother Gabe. When it isn't this, it's a slice of life series about Alex getting acclimated to the town, making connections with the people around her, and how they deal with their own emotions. And you know, on paper, you can do both of these things. But True Colors really struggles to balance out the narrative in a compelling way. There's one episode where a good chunk of the town helps out Gabe's surrogate kid Ethan by recreating his comics as a live-action roleplay, and this section is honestly really wholesome and fun. It's a problem because this is what the entire episode basically is. And barely anything happens on the side of the narrative where Alex is trying to oust a mega conglomerate for their role in Gabe's death. There really needed to be more balance here. And I honestly feel like this game's mechanic with reading emotions was kind of a missed opportunity. Now, I don't mean in terms of how she got them, we don't necessarily need to know that. I mean in the sense that the writers don't seem to take full advantage of her abilities. Now, sometimes they pull them off just fine, like early in game when she helps people cope with their emotions, but then it starts throwing curveballs, like when Alex can essentially read Ryan's mind on why he's so happy, or when out of nowhere she gains the ability to suck people's emotions out. It's really flimsy, and at times it seems like they really weren't sure on how to use her powers to her full creative potential. And finally, for a choice-based game, the choices in this game have very little narrative value. Now, look, I'm not asking for Until Dawn or Fallout New Vegas levels of your decisions impact everything in this game, but at least give us something like The Walking Dead where your choices impact the interactions around you. There's no weight to your decisions, that is, until the very end, and even then there's no real clear connection to how your choices affect the end. So I mean, overall, True Colors is not an amazing game, but it isn't necessarily bad either. And honestly, given this franchise's track record before this game, that's saying a hell of a lot.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
So I really debated where I was going to put Halo Infinite on this list, because I'm so split on it. On one hand, it has a great and fun campaign with a good open world and even better gameplay to surround it. And on that note, the multiplayer, when considering the gameplay by itself, is a fantastic evolution of what made Bungie's games, specifically Halo 3, so fun and replayable. So why is it on here and not the best games end of things? Fucking everything else. Halo Infinite's multiplayer is a conglomerate mess of the release now, fix later model that has plagued AAA gaming for several years, while simultaneously having one of the absolute worst in-game economies I've ever seen in a video game. There is no incentive to continuously play Infinite. The progression in this game is the worst I've ever seen in a video game. Like seriously, how did this get greenlit? Having this system where only challenges progress you and they only progress a battle pass is horrible. I don't think I need to go too in detail about the store. It's bad. At the time I was writing this, it was severely overpriced, and even though the prices are lower, this is still stuff you should be able to unlock naturally. And that's the thing I hate most. If there were a traditional progression system, like, I don't know, every other multiplayer shooter, and all of this stuff could be earned in-game, this would easily be the best Halo has been in over a decade, and I'd have it high on my best games list. But nope, every time I play and I see someone with the Iron Man coatings or the fucking weeb cat ears, I have to remember, oh yeah, I have to shell out $30 for that instead of earn it by playing the game. Not to mention the customization in this is really not great. It's so overly restrictive, with the armors only allowed on certain cores, the color customization being mitigated to armor coatings. Like, yeah, cool, $8 if I want to make my Spartan blue.
For fucking blue!
All the missing features in this, from Forge to a working theater mode, emphasis on working, and no co-op campaign. This game frustrates me because all of the pieces are there for the best Halo game yet, but instead we either have to wait for things to change or watch as 343 very subtly doubles down on some design choices like the store and the progression system. This one honestly hurts.
Alright, shield. I'm a pussy that use rain shield. The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
Alright, so like Infinite, I wasn't sure if I would put Call of Duty Vanguard on the worst or best list. Because the thing is, I still kind of stand by what I said in my Vanguard video. I really love the multiplayer in this game. The gameplay is classic Call of Duty in all the right ways, the gunplay feels just as great as Modern Warfare 2019, and all the maps range from decent to great. But combined with multiplayer's shortcomings and the rest of the game, yeah, I still kind of have to put it here. I gotta look at the whole package. So the big problem with multiplayer is mostly the lack of game modes. If you aren't grinding out camos, there really isn't much here. The core gameplay is still fun, but there's no variety outside the maps. Not to mention Champion Hill is just garbage. Yeah, I'm not sugarcoating it, this is a bad game mode, and I wish they just brought Gunfight back. But outside this, what Vanguard does isn't really anything new. It's a very, very solid core Call of Duty experience, but it adds nothing compelling to the table. It's just a slightly better version of what Modern Warfare and Black Ops Cold War did. Campaign is a mixed bag. I like a couple of the characters and, well, one in particular, but the campaign is very meh. It's, again, nothing new, just what you would usually expect from a Call of Duty campaign. It's also really short too. I was not expecting only 9 missions and that's it. I think this is probably one of the shortest campaigns in the series. And zombies! Seriously, I don't know if this or Modern Warfare Spec Ops was the worst third mode they ever added to a COD game. So yeah, it has a great multiplayer that I love a lot, but not much else. It's a shame because had this release at a better time where Call of Duty wasn't currently in shambles and, well, Activision and Blizzard were in shambles, I feel like this game could have been much better received. But yeah, I love this game's multiplayer, but the rest of the package is not worth it.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
Okay, so this one's the last minute pick and the most recent thing I've put into this video. I more or less just played this before making this video. But when I finished this game, I knew it needed to be here. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. It's just Diamond and Pearl. But worse. I have really not been happy with the direction Pokemon has been taking lately. I was already losing steam on the 3DS games, which were fine, but just more Pokemon with very little innovation. Sword and Shield basically killed any hype I had for it simply because of Dexit alone. And then these games. Again, I don't know what else to say. It's Diamond and Pearl, but worse. The game is unbalanced as hell because of the forced EXP share. You're constantly over-leveled up until the Pokemon League when suddenly the game decides, hey, maybe we should challenge the player now. And suddenly you're underleveled in a difficulty spike that I can describe as worse than Cave Story's best fucking ending. This has all of Diamond and Pearl's flaws, from its awkward pacing to its lack of fire types. It regresses to archaic tropes like adding usage to TMs again. The entire time I was playing the game, I was practically brain dead and bored out of my mind, consistently wanting to finish it just so I could say I finished it and never touch the game again, which is already bad enough to think for any video game you play. But then I reached this spike at the Pokemon League and I can't even finish the game. And now, I don't want to. Like, what am I missing out on? It's Diamond and Pearl again, but worse. With no improvements, barely any new content besides what should be expected. Regressing to old design choices that should have been regressed on. I hate these games. I don't want to talk about them anymore. Next. Now, when it came to the worst game I played all year, I wasn't even sure if I should put it here. So the story of this one is that I bought it on PS4, and upon playing it, it was so borderline unplayable that I went and requested a refund after only a brief period of time playing it. So I technically didn't finish it. Or really play much of it for that matter. But if you've seen gameplay for this and the discourse around it, you probably know I didn't need to finish it for it to make it this list anyways. Call it cheating, but I don't think there's any game that could have topped the worst list here. So with that in mind, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach.
Five Nights at Freddy's, that's where I wanna be. Five Nights at Freddy's.
I love Five Nights at Freddy's. I've loved it ever since that silly little man by the name of Mark E. Plyer did a funny Let's Play of it.
What's that, nut?
I've loved the concept, the story, the lore, the atmosphere. It's been a huge influence on my life. So I was intrigued and excited when this was first announced. And then total radio silence except for the new State of Play trailers every now and then. Between that and the lack of marketing and communication from the dev Steelwool, I was getting very worried about the game. But man, I was not expecting this. This is honestly Sonic 06 levels of busted. Security Breach on a technical level is a mess. Bugs, glitches, optimization, it's all a mess. This game could barely run on my PS4 with pop-in, unloaded textures, blurry textures, pixelated screens. The PS5 and PC versions aren't really that much better. The game is broken beyond belief. But even then, like putting all of that aside, Security Breach fundamentally is just not a good game. When it comes to being a free roam horror game, it's incredibly mediocre and very poorly designed. The Pizzaplex is massive and easy to get lost in, objectives are usually not very clear, And when they are, they require having complete knowledge of a place you can barely navigate to begin with. There's no sense of direction whatsoever. The fact that the animatronics can teleport to your location and all function the exact same way completely defeats any kind of intrigue from the past games, where every animatronic had their own ways of dealing with them. The story's awful. FNAF has been so far up its ass with its lore in recent years, Kingdom Hearts has been telling it to calm the fuck down. This game brings it to brand new heights. Gregory is boring. Vanessa and Vanny barely have any influence and are completely wasted. The story is barely put together. There are entire tidbits of information that either aren't elaborated on or are just straight up missing. And not in the loosely tied together way like in the original games. I mean so many plot points and threads that make absolutely no sense. This is like the 4th time the main story has changed. It's like the story only changes now so they can fuel theory videos, and that completely misses the point of why FNAF was so intriguing to begin with. It's incredibly clear from the lack of marketing, communication, and how the devs have been discussing the game recently that this game had a horrible development cycle, and all I want to know is what happened. These devs know how to make a good FNAF game. Help Wanted is one of the best games the series has to offer, and they go from Help Wanted to this? Like, what happened? There's a lot more I could go into here. Honestly, I'm considering making a separate video about the state of FNAF. No. I said considering. It's not a promise. I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing with this channel yet. But look, my point is, FNAF Security Breach is the worst game in this series, and it's the worst game of the year. It isn't even a contest. Now, there were a handful of games I played only a bit that I think would have made this list if I played them a lot more. Persona 5 Strikers, New Pokemon Snap, Chris Tales, Scarlet Nexus, but there were a few games that ultimately made this part of the list, mostly, honestly, just because I completed them.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
It's been a while since I saw Resident Evil take the world by storm like this, and it's definitely because of the gameplay, not for some other reason, not like everyone else has made a joke like that before. Also, side note and hot take, I think the vampire sisters are hotter than the tall vampire lady. Yeah, I said it. I fucking said it. Okay, let's talk about the game. Resident Evil Village isn't my favorite in the series, but it's still a pretty good game. This game takes all the best elements of past Resident Evil games and mostly gets them right. The game's atmosphere is like a roller coaster. One second you're going in guns blazing against a herd of werewolves, the next you're running away from the most fucking terrifying entity that has ever graced a video game or horror property in general since PT. Like, holy shit, I want an entire horror game just like this. It definitely isn't perfect. The last act of the game kind of goes on longer than it should, and it delves into the more action-y sides of the franchise, and I don't mean the good kind. But aside from that, it's a very well-designed action horror game. Do I think it's a high-tier entry like 4 or 2 Remake? Not really. Hell, honestly, I liked 7 a lot more. But Village is a pretty good time from the beginning to close to its end.
I am the milkman. My milk is delicious.
It should be illegal for a game to be as creative as Psychonauts 2. Holy shit. I played through the first game earlier this year after I got my Series X, and while it was a good time, it certainly has not aged well in certain aspects, specifically in some design choices and story beats. But Psychonauts 2 feels like not only a step up from the first game in those aspects, but a fully realized and imagined idea of what makes Psychonauts so great and so cool. It has the best story of any game I played this year. The characters here are so endearing, from Raz to Crawler to the Psychonauts to Lily to Raz's family to fucking everybody. These characters are so well realized and developed. The game's art style and cutscenes are gorgeous. It's like I'm watching a modern love letter to the movies that inspired this Tim Burton-esque style to begin with. The levels in this are so fucking good. Like, I cannot stress how fucking good they are. The platforming and design is excellent. The jokes are fucking hilarious. And the ways in which they tie into the characters' minds is nothing short of genius, honestly. I love how this game handles so many sensitive topics, from addiction to mental health to anxiety and depression to hiding your true self. Like, I just cannot express enough in words just how fucking good this game's story, characters, platforming, design, art style, everything is. Psychonauts 2 is one of the best platformers I've ever played. It's one of the best stories I've experienced in a video game. Hell, I might call it one of the best games of this current console generation, and it only just started. And can you believe I think there's another game that came out this year that's even better than this? Yeah, so after all that gushing from start to finish, barely being able to contain or explain how much I love Psychonauts 2, what could possibly be better? What could I possibly love more than something I gave shower and praise all over? It's Metroid Dread. I'm not gonna do this build up or keep a dumb gag running. It's Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread is fucking incredible. And look, the lead up to this was already something to behold. I'm not exaggerating when I say I cried when Dread was first revealed. I genuinely could not believe this game actually existed and was going to release in only a few short months. And even more unbelievable is that it actually lived up to the hype, and I'm so fucking happy it did. This is classic Metroid at its peak. The locations, the atmosphere, the gameplay, the exploration, the upgrades. It's all so immaculately designed and so well thought out. I loved exploring every inch of planet ZDR. It's such a foreboding planet that makes you feel, well, dreadful. It also can be pretty fucking intense. Metroid Dread is hard. It's the kind of horror you don't see too often in games anymore besides, I don't know, Cuphead, Crash Bandicoot, Dark Souls. Haha, ha. I made the funny Dark Souls joke. Am I funny yet? This game kicked my ass and I loved it. It's hard in the sense that almost any fuck up you can think of always comes down to you. It's always your fault, and not many games can be designed that well. Samus is a badass in this, and she knows it. Her characterization is the best it's ever been. The boss fights are some of the best I've ever played in any video game, let alone a Metroid game. They test your skills and reflexes to the nth degree, and it makes it all the more satisfying when you finally kick their ass. The Emmy are palm sweat inducing, and even despite some issues I have with them and the fact that they aren't exactly the follow-up to the SAX that I hoped they would be, they're still scary as hell to go up against, and again, satisfying when you finally beat them. That's probably the best word I can use to describe this game. It's just satisfying. Satisfying when you find new upgrades and use them to find new items and become stronger. Satisfying when you finally overcome the boss fights and flex how good you've become at the game. Satisfying as a dramatic follow-up to Fusion and a conclusion to the classic Metroid story. Satisfying because after almost 2 decades, Nintendo is finally once again giving Metroid the spotlight again. And everyone, and I mean everyone, is excited for it again. It has been quite some time since I loved a game this much. If you haven't played this for yourself yet, for the love of God, go play it. It's one of the best games on Switch, it's one of the best games of this generation, it's one of the best Metroid games in the franchise, and for me, it's the best game of 2021. So, that was my comprehensive list of all the stuff I enjoyed and all the stuff I didn't enjoy. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. This is my first time trying to create more elaborate, involved content like this, and I'd like to make more stuff like this alongside whatever stupid memes I want to make with my other videos. I know making videos like this is probably going to take a lot more practice. I mean, I'm sure you can probably tell in my voice that's starting to give out now that I'm not really used to this just yet. But if you like this, let me know what movies, shows, games, or music you liked and didn't like this year, and maybe consider subscribing. If you subscribe, I'll give you my very own special trophy for subscribing. It's worth absolutely nothing and redirects you to Markiplier's channel so you can make another Let's Play on Five Nights at Freddy's.